And good day to everybody. I'm Walter, I'm the Dutch mentor, and welcome to our S.M.A.R.T podcast, where S is for self-care, M is for mindful growth, A is for adaptive learning, R is for rhythmic operations, T is for thriving community, and P is, of course, for performance. I'm so happy to have Rod here with me today, and we're going to talk today about how to build a better business, which fits right into the R for rhythmic operations. And of course, it is going to be quick, it's going to be focused, and I promise you there will be tangible takeaways, because there's nothing worse than listening to something and forgetting about it tomorrow. So let's take action together. Rod, thank you very much for coming today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, Walter, it's a pleasure to be with you. I love the term SMART because my most recent book is Nobody is Smarter Than Everybody. And
That's right.
is, I think that's something that's really not appreciated by most people. Most people see intelligence as something that's an individual phenomenon, but they don't realize when we do that, we limit our intelligence to the capacity of one brain. And we built organizations around that notion with top-down hierarchies, because what do top-down hierarchies do? They limit the intelligence of the supposedly smartest person at the top. But that smartest person really isn't the highest intelligence in the organization. The organization's highest intelligence rests in the collective intelligence of its own people. But it operates very, very differently from individual intelligence. And James S.M.A.R.T wrote a book a few years back called The Wisdom of Crowds. And he made the notion, even when people see it, they find it hard to believe.
Yeah, it's true. Well, listen, I think we have a great topic to dive into. And my favorite statistic is always that 95% of executive leaders believe in leadership development, which giving the right skills, tools, knowledge, and abilities to the frontline leaders, but only 5% of them take meaningful action. And they forget that 90% of the frontline reports to a middle manager. And that's where the collective lies, right? That's where the real power of the organization is. And instead, they give the focus to the top 1%. And then they wonder, why are we not high performing, or why are we struggling? So let's dive right into it. Take me on a journey on some of your personal experience and stories you would like to share with us today.
Sure. I learned this new method. I learned it. It was written, necessity is the mother of invention, and I found that out. Somewhere in the mid-1990s, I was with the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association in the United States. We were a business alliance of 39 separate companies, and we were doing okay, but just okay. And I was asked to lead the operations and turn the business around. And the thought occurred to me very quickly, we lead this like it's a hierarchy, but it's really not. It's a network. And maybe we need to lead this very, very differently. And there really wasn't much out there about how to lead a network. All the management literature is really about how to be a good hierarchical leader, a good humane leader. But we needed to do something different. And so at the core of this was we need to make decisions differently. So we're not fighting with the 39 organizations. We're working together with them. And so one of the things we recognized is we have to change the way we meet around core business issues. And we had operated like most traditional companies, which is you either meet by level or you meet by department. So senior people meet with senior people, middle people with middle people. We said, we're going to mix all of that up. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a meeting of about 40 to 50 people. We're going to get a microcosm of the business in the room. We're going to mix the departments, levels. We want it such that anything that could come up, that anybody who would be impacted could jump up and say, wait a minute, have you thought about this? And we also designed the meeting so that it would minimize debate, especially in the first couple of hours. Because we notice, and I think our audience will relate to this, debates are really not good formats for conversation. And when they're successful, they often accomplish least common denominator solutions. And so we wanted to accomplish high-level, high-competence solutions. And so we knew in order to do that, we had to set things up so people were listening to each other. And so we had a discipline we call clarifying questions. So in the beginning, as people presented ideas, you couldn't agree or disagree with them. You could only ask them clarifying questions. And we wanted to get people out of this mindset of operating from agreement or disagreement. Because when you're in the agreement or disagreement mode, you really don't listen to each other. My goal is to change your mind. Your goal is to change my mind, and we stay focused on that. I never hear what you really think. You never really hear what I think. So clarifying questions got us around. And these meetings were designed for 2 days, and we used some facilitated processes, which many of our leaders have seen, because they bring people in who lead these great meetings, and they are great meetings. But then about 2 or 3 weeks later, everything's back to the way it used to be, and people have had that experience. Well, what was interesting is at the end of this first 2-day meeting that we did to put this in place, we had accomplished in 2 days what we hadn't done in 2 decades. We got 50 people to unanimously agree to what we needed to do, and that stunned us. We just wanted most people to agree. We did not expect unanimous agreement, but we realized looking back why we got that, because we had all the perspectives in the room. So as we were thinking something, somebody could jump up and say, no, you can't do that. And I remember being puzzled. Why? How does this even affect you? And then they would explain. And everybody's light bulb would go off. Wow, we've discovered that before we've begun the work. And that's going to save us time and money. And what happened as we began to use this discipline is that everything we did was on time, under budget, high quality, because we were front-ending what we didn't know before we started the work. And that is the benefit you get from what I call collective intelligence. And so in the process of designing this no debate meeting, what we actually came up with, and this is where I really began to see the power of collective intelligence, a way in which we could create, as many of the people stated, a higher level of intelligence than any one of us could ever have come up with by ourselves. Just demonstrating nobody really is smarter than everybody. Now, just to close out this story, I'm going to take you forward 15 years. I've left the organization. We have had our greatest 5-year growth period that we've ever had. We went from a $6 billion enterprise to a $19 billion enterprise. Part of that was normal inflationary growth, but part of that was actual business growth. So it was a combination of both. So 15 years later, I'm out of the organization, and I'm using these collective intelligence workshops as part of my practice. And I go into a meeting where I've designed it for 5 hours. And 3 hours is going to be discussion, and then 2 hours is going to be the things we need to do. And at the last minute, the coordinator says, we only have 3 hours. And I can remember internally feeling angry. You should have given me more time. But then I quickly I got 3 hours. I have to reduce the first 3 hours down to 1 hour. And so on the spot, I decided rather than have small group meetings in which different people would come up with ideas, we had a process to come up with the best 4. I just handed out a lot of Post-it notes to the 25 people in the room. And I said, write down as many ideas as you have on how we need to solve the problem we were dealing with. And it was a very time-critical problem. Had to be fixed by the first of the year, and it was going to be very customer-facing. So there was a lot on the line, and they were failing to get to a solution, which is why I was brought in. We threw all the Post-it notes on the wall. I said to them, I'm going to give you 6 dots. I'm going to give you 10 minutes to place those dots on. We must have 250 items up on the wall. And somebody said, well, shouldn't we take the time to condense them? And I said, we don't have that time. Just go with it. Let's see what happens. And after the 10 minutes, they placed their dots. And anybody looking at this has got to say, this is really incredibly haphazard. All right. This is what I mean. You won't recognize it when you see it. And so I said, all right, start calling out items with lots of dots. And as people would call them out, somebody would say, well, here's another item. It's the same thing. And I would just say, well, then it really has a lot of dots. Let's get it up here. And we wound up taking those 250 items down to a list. There was probably like a top 20 or so that came out of it. And then I gave them 4 more dots. And I said, vote those any way you want. And sure enough, we got to the same place that we would have gotten had we had the full 5 hours and we had the small group discussions that I wanted to have. And I asked them, if we do these top 4 items you just have identified, will it solve the problem? And all 25 of them said, that's it. If we do those 4 things, we have our solution. And after the session was over, I reflected. I says, oh my goodness, I'd never seen this before in all the years I've used this. The collective intelligence was already in the room. We didn't have a single word of discussion. We had Post-it notes and dots, but we really didn't talk about and compare the ideas. And they were able to come up with the top 4. And they did it in less than 3 hours. And the solution worked. And on January 1, there were no customer-facing issues. You had to see it to believe it. But that's when I really realized, wow, collective intelligence is already there. You just have to aggregate it. If
Yeah.
all leaders could do that and could get past the uncomfortability of how this process looks, they have an incredible resource that can help them to adapt in this rapidly changing.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that. And I can very much relate to that. It's very similar to what I use in my business practices as well. And the problem is that it's behavior, right? It's the behavior of people that holds us back. It can be the pride and ego of the smartest person in the room who prevents, we're soliciting and empowering everybody, the collective, to bring these things forward because the environment is not safe, or I have to always be right, or I am always right. So again, the foundation of what we want to set is to have that trust, that you need to be teachable, and you have to find that common bond and common understanding. And that is where that civil discord, not the debate, but the civil discord, the discussion needs to take place. I usually say, lead with the why. Why do you think that way? Because that allows for much deeper understanding. I love the way you put it, is by clarifying questions itself, right? So with that said, how do you overcome, or how do you set the stage for a team to work? Do you do any pre-work? Do you tell them to read something? Do you tell them to get them to think outside of that box, right? Our brain is a box, and people are very much locked into that. The brightest ideas rarely come at first, not even second, and maybe the third, and it likely comes outside of the box of things that we're already familiar with. Tell me a little bit about that.
That's a great question. We were very focused on this. The preparation was nothing. I didn't want any preparation because it starts locking people further into their thinking.
That's right.
What I wanted was all perspectives in the room, including ones I personally disagreed with. Because part of the reason that large organizations can't get everybody on board is they silence some of the voices up front because they're just convinced a priority, you have nothing to contribute, you're wrong, your ideas are terrible. Well, maybe that's true for 80% of their ideas or 90%. But what we discovered in these collective intelligence workshops is a lot of times these people who we thought, were weirdos, are okay, they had some kernel of truth that only they saw. And that kernel wound up getting into the solution. This is why when we did these, and again, I mentioned we were very surprised. In Blue Cross Blue Shield, I did these over 10 years. I didn't have a single one where everybody in the room didn't agree. And that just kept stunning me over and over. And I realized the reason is we had all the voices in the room and we combined all of the strengths. This is why the peer-to-peer network is better than the top-down hierarchy. The top-down hierarchy is limited to the extent of the single individual brain. In the collective intelligence workshop, we move beyond that. We bring together the strengths of many brains. And that is why nobody's smarter than everybody. It isn't that any single individual has a solution. It's the whole group does. And what you need is the ability to aggregate it. When I left Blue Cross Blue Shield, one of the things I wanted to do, I wrote my first book in this space. I want to know, why the hell did this work? We did this intuitively, but it was phenomenal. And I came across, and I mentioned it before, James Sorowiecki's book, The Wisdom of Crowds. And he identified you must have 4 conditions. If you're missing any one of them, then you can't tap into the wisdom of the crowd. The first is diversity of opinion. You've got to welcome all ideas, including the ones that you don't like. And in the Western world, we're in trouble with that today. 2, you have to encourage independent thinking. People must be free to express their ideas, whether you agree with them or not. no matter what those ideas are. 3, local knowledge, people who are actually close to customers, close to processes, not just high-level thinkers. And 4, and this is where those dots were so critical, you need an aggregation mechanism. And when I came across that, I said, that's why they worked. We had all 4. We got it accidentally, but we got it.
Yeah, so the only thing I will say, I 100% agree with that, the last component, the dots, right? So how do we prevent group thinking from taking place? Like if you could only do that dots in a digital environment where people cannot see what other people have voted, because then you can truly have original thought by the individual. Then once it is aggregated, puts onto the board to say, look what we came up with. And that's, so you have to be mindful about that, because the human behavior is, I don't want controversy, I don't want conflict. So it's easy for me to go along because everybody is already doing it rather than looking outside. That's one comment. The second comment, you use the weirdo name, right? And certainly we have that. I would relabel that and have people focus more on the neurodiverse people in our society.
Sure.
And listen, not to call them weirdo, but sometimes people are interpreted who are different as weirdos.
Yeah.
But we should not underestimate their abilities to see things that we normal human beings cannot see, can be of great value, right? And that's where it comes back into what you say, that diverse team. Everybody should be there. And the difference between an introvert and the extrovert, today's society, often the people who are the loudest get the mostest, while the silent, the introverts, often know better than any extrovert. And that is the mastery of the facilitation that needs to take place to be able to make sure that we create that safe, psychological, physical safe condition that everybody has a voice and the way they want to present themselves. So really, really good stuff. So listen, I could talk about this for hours, by the way, but let's get to it. So what is something as a leader who's listening to this, an emerging leader who's maybe in control of a smaller department, give them a couple of 2-3 things that they can take away from today and actually start practicing so they can get these outcomes that you're just talking about.
Okay. 1, keep in mind the 4 conditions for collective intelligence. And it seems to be even more important today, really invite diversity of opinion. If you want to avoid groupthink, the reason we're having so much groupthink today is we're dealing in tribes, and the tribes are separating themselves. I only sit down with people who agree with me.
Yep.
So that's critical. 2, the role of the leader changes. I was the highest title in the room when I did these. I was the only person who couldn't express their own opinion, because I knew if I told people what I thought, they'd think to themselves, well, this is what we're going to do anyway. Let's get on board. And 3, be open to discovery and be open to uncomfortability. There were times where the people would go down paths. I thought this is wrong. As a leader, I need to step in and stop this. But I knew if I did it, it would kill the process forever, because they'd say, Rod Collins, he likes difference of opinion as long as you agree with it. And so I'm glad that I had the courage to ride past it, because I often found we were on a pathway to a better solution, and we couldn't have gotten there without stopping by this midterm point. And so many discussions in organizations get stopped at what I call those midterm points. And leaders are cutting themselves off from a pathway to really critical business information.
Rod, you hit a home run here. I think that if people really take this and really practice these principles in their everyday life, both personal and professionally, I think we all would be better off. And really, it is such a shame that I see this all of the time, is that the people with the collective intel, the people on the front line who are close to the processes, are often not even, given a minute's worth of thought or given an opportunity to speak. And often the real solutions come from the collective. So thank you for joining me today. It's a really valuable conversation. Is there anything that you would like to say as a closing, as maybe a quote that really can be imprinted? And of course, where can we find you? How can they get your book? And how can they connect with you?
Yeah, if people want to learn more, my latest book is called Nobody is Smarter Than Everybody. And it highlights, by the way, 3 companies that don't have bosses that are all successful and have been for decades. So people might find that interesting. And if they want to learn more information, especially how I'm applying this to AI, because I think this is a critical question there, they can visit my website, which is rodcollins.net.
Excellent. And you're also on LinkedIn if they want to connect and message you from there?
I'm on LinkedIn as well.
Okay,
That's true.
very good.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Rod, thank you very much for joining me today. I certainly will pick up a copy of the book myself, and I look forward to reading all about it. Have a wonderful day. Thank you again for joining me. And I'm sure that somebody, if they follow through and take proper action, they too, in just 15 minutes a day, can become the leader they always wanted to be, and certainly the leader that their team needs, and flatten that hierarchy. I love that approach. Put our pride and ego aside, and let's do business a better way. With that said, we'll see everybody again real soon. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Walter.